The Boston Massacre, The Great Debate by Eliana Coy. Looking back on history, there are many great debates, but there's one that has never been resolved. The debate of who was responsible for the Boston Massacre. This debate continues to be held in classrooms across the nation and higher academic gatherings. The Boston Massacre occurred on the eve of the 5th of March in 1770, followed by the trials on October 24th and November 27th, 1770, and has not only affected the lives of the people involved with the American Revolution in the 1700s, but has carried over to the present. The debate of who was responsible for the deaths of Samuel Gray, Samuel Maverick, James Caldwell, Crispus Attucks, and Patrick Carr has never been resolved because no one took responsibility for their own actions. In 1768, when the 14th and 29th regiments from England were quartered in Boston, they did not receive a ready welcome from the greater population. Prior to their arrival, the Stamp Act and the Sugar Act occurred, driving the people of Boston into mad hysteria, necessitating the British fleet in Boston. Governor Thomas Hutchinson wrote letters to England regarding their coming, later begging for the regiments to stay, not feeling safe and secure otherwise. But the people of Boston felt like they were under house arrest. This feeling of frustration and fear caused tension, which led to confrontation, such as what happened on March 2nd, 1770, when one of the soldiers looking for work at one of the rope merchant's shop was told that if he wanted work he could clean the outhouse. The soldier left, and later came back with a few of his friends to the man's shop, where they began terrorizing the merchant and his assistants. 3 days later, on the evening of March 5th, 1770, the Boston Massacre occurred. The Boston Massacre is one of the best-known events that illustrates the mindset of people in America prior to the Revolutionary War. This event was not a surprise, with Josiah Quincy Jr. commenting, "To use an allusion somewhat homely, may we not wonder that the acid and the alkali did not sooner ferment?" According to witnesses from the Boston Massacre trial, the Boston Massacre occurred on King Street, with a local boy taunting with the sentries on duty. One of the sentries, Private White, came forward and hit the boy in the face with his musket. Just after White did this, the citizens of Boston, who were infuriated by his blunt attack of a young boy, surrounded him, making him fear for his life. White called out for help and ran as the crowd advanced on him. He was heard by the other soldiers off duty in the barracks of the 29th Regiment. The current captain on duty, Captain Preston, and his men on duty, William Wimes, James Hartigan, William Macaulay, Matthew Kilroy, William Warren, John Carroll, and Hugh Montgomery went out into the street. Once they were out among the crowd, the soldiers began pointing their bayonets, trying to reach Hugh White. Not soon after they reached him, the citizens of Boston began throwing ice, stone rocks, sticks, clubs, and other such things that were easily at hand. But when a few people in the crowd took up some sticks and began to drag them along the muskets of the soldiers could not bear it any more, and a few of them fired into the crowd, killing 4 right away, mortally wounding 1 who died soon later, and injuring a few others. The soldiers were put in jail, with Bostonians claiming for the trial as soon as possible. But Governor Thomas Hutchinson requested that they wait a few months for the rioting to cool down. During this time, John Adams was confronted and informed about Josiah Quincy's decision that he would not do the defense for the British soldiers without Adams consenting to help with the case. John Adams agreed and proceeded to get ready for the trials. Samuel Quincy and Robert Treat Payne were the lawyers for the prosecution defending the colonists, with Josiah Quincy Jr., younger brother to Samuel Quincy, and John Adams being the lawyers for the defense of the soldiers. The first trial that took place was for Captain Thomas Preston, taking place from the 24th to the 30th of October, with John Adams and Josiah Quincy as the defense of the accused. He was tried separately from the others as a prerogative of an officer and a gentleman. He is found not guilty because of the doubt that John Adams created whether or not he had ordered his soldiers to fire. The trial of the soldiers happened 1 month later on November 27, 1770, with the lawyers questioning witnesses on each point and giving their speeches. The jury decided their verdict of an acquittal for all the soldiers save Matthew Kilroy and Hugh Montgomery. These two, instead of being accused of murder, were accused of manslaughter. They in turn went to the church for protection, and instead of being executed were only branded, as to not ever be under the safe keeping of the church again, in the view of the entire courthouse. After the trial ended, the soldiers left at Castle Rock to escape all the anger and torment of the colonists residing in Boston, Massachusetts. Here they would stay, hidden away from the public prying eye of the locals. According to Brigham Young University history professor Neil L. York, the Boston Massacre is a debate still in question. Many schools rehearse the Boston Massacre trial, with the main issue of debate being whether the British opened fire on the colonists with little or no provocation. In the trial itself, the soldiers each pled not guilty of murder. The debate was whether a homicide was committed and by whom it was committed, and if there is any evidence that would suggest it was manslaughter. This was not an easy decision, but was an important distinction. Homicide is the act of killing someone, but can be lawful or unlawful, and includes murder and manslaughter, which are both unlawful, the key difference being the intent and provocation. In the trial, Josiah Quincy asked important questions about what would excuse or justify the soldiers to act the way they did. He first reminded the jury that the soldiers were boys, far from home, and that they were just trying to do their job. Since they didn't get paid very much, they had to get work from the colonists, who didn't want them there and wouldn't give them good jobs. On the other hand, the colonists had a love of liberty and justice. The cause of liberty prompted the colonists' actions, but Quincy wanted to ensure that this love of liberty didn't push them to not take responsibility for their own actions, keeping their wisdom, valor, and virtue intact. Even though the Boston Massacre may never be resolved, there's something that can be learned from it. That is, by not taking responsibility and playing the victim, things can get out of hand. Many mistakes were made that cost 5 individuals their lives. First, England was guilty for ignoring the colonists and taxed them unduly in order to pay their debts from the French and Indian War. Some colonists were guilty of rebelling and for being ungrateful for the help they received during this war. England was guilty of sending soldiers over without communicating with the colonists to find out what was going on. Some colonists were guilty of being mean to the soldiers by not helping them find work and then harassing them. The soldiers were guilty of bringing out loaded muskets and shooting at the colonists. Throughout this historical event, many people blamed others for what was going on, not taking responsibility for their own actions, with the consequences of their actions leading to the Boston Massacre. We may never know what would have happened without the Boston Massacre and the use for which it was put. But we know it did happen, and according to John Adams, it was an important event, with him stating that the 5th of March, 1770, ought to be an eternal warning to this nation, because on that night the foundation of American independence was laid. In addition to the possible role the Boston Massacre played in helping create the United States of America, it was a success if you learn to accept responsibility for your own actions.